right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Wednesday Night Sports Podcast, your midweek sports update. I am your host, Jordan. This is my co-host, Chris.
Good Wednesday evening, everyone.
Yeah, we're just two more random guys on the internet who think their opinion matters. So let's start off with some of the breaking news in the NFL. As we know, recently we had the passing of Rondale Moore. RIP to Rondale Moore. Thoughts and prayers are out with his family and friends. It's kind of sudden. It seems like it was kind of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, as initial reports are indicating, which is just tragic. And I just going off topic here a little bit, and I know Chris and I are both kind of advocates for mental health awareness. So again, if you ever feel like you need help, please just reach out to somebody, and friends and family. People are always willing to help, and they would rather listen to you complain than go to your funeral. So it's a little off topic, but yeah, Chris, what are your thoughts on Rondale Moore, the most recently a Vikings wide receiver, formerly an Arizona Cardinals wide receiver? What are your thoughts?
It's super unfortunate, and it's a conversation that I feel like we shouldn't be having. It really sucks that it was brought, I guess, to this point. I'm really glad that you kind of gave the shout out to just mental health in general, because that is something that, that's super important to me. If you or someone you know is struggling, there's so many means of support that are out there that are just a Google away. So you're not alone, and I don't know. I hope that in a situation like this, I hope that we see changes or maybe updates to the mental health programs that the NFL has. I don't know what that would be, but we don't want to be talking about this sort of thing ever. And I know that the NFL cares a lot about player safety and not just physical safety too. So I don't know, just all things that I'm thinking about during this unfortunate time.
Yeah. No, it sucks, and like you said, hopefully there's plenty of former players who have come out and said that they struggle with mental health and just all sorts of different ailments and stuff like that. So yes, it'd be really good to see the NFL try to. And I've seen, like I said, recent things where they're trying to help players with mental health and stuff like that. But as we said before, there's plenty of resources available. There's things available, so please. I know it's tough as a man too sometimes to reach out and say that you need help, but yes. Sorry to get off topic a little bit, but that's kind of, like I said,
it's an important topic.
Yeah, important topic based on what's going on with Rondale Moore. And again, RIP to him, and thoughts and prayers are with his family. But kind of transitioning a little bit into more of the NFL news recently, going with your Seahawks, Chris. The Seattle Seahawks just hired Brian Fleury, I hope I said that right, as their new offensive coordinator. He was previously the 49ers run game coordinator and tight ends coach. He's been there since 2019. But previously, before that, he was the former linebacker coach. So he's kind of played both sides of the ball. He's played offense, he's played defense. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting hire. But again, we know some of the coaches under Kyle Shanahan have gone off to do good things. So what are your thoughts on Brian Fleury being hired by your Seattle Seahawks?
I'm very excited about it. At the end of the day, I'm very, very excited. Am I a little, I guess there's some caution there because Brian Fleury has never been a play caller. However, he's had a very long and diverse history with football over his career. He's bounced around on both the offensive and the defensive sides of the ball. He did a lot of analyst work as well for various NFL teams over the years too. And so someone who's that knowledgeable, I think is going to do well with whatever position they end up, finding themselves in. And yeah, working with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, especially over this past season, with how just crazy it was for them, and getting to that 12-5 record by the end of it, is a super huge feat, with all the injuries that they had. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about there, but I think that Brian Fleury and the way he wants to have a run-dominant football game, and just is really focused on, I think, to literally quote him from the other day, just being violent and aggressive. I think that is really on the same wavelength as what the Seattle Seahawks have been preaching, especially with their defense. So seeing some of that come over to the offensive side of the ball, I think is going to do nothing but good things in theory. So everything is in theory right now. We still got like 4 months before the season even starts. So I'm very excited to see what Brian Fleury and the offense cooks up for the 2026 season.
Exactly. And it's very nerve wracking when you have a very successful offense and then you bring in a new offensive coordinator and he comes with his own playbook. And again, you never know how the quarterback's going to react, how the whole offense is going to react. So we saw it again firsthand in Detroit as a Lions fan with Ben Johnson leaving and bringing in John Morton. And Dan Campbell ended up taking over play calling duties halfway through the season. So speaking of that transitioning, like I said, I am excited to see what Brian Fleury does in Seattle. Hopefully, he does better things than John Morton was able to do in Detroit. But speaking on that, like I said, we will transition. We're going to be starting our NFL divisional breakdown, and we're going to be breaking down every division as we kind of go through this offseason and discuss who is going to be leaving, who might be coming in, kind of some of the big topics surrounding these teams in the offseason. And we're going to start with the NFC North. I clearly am a little bit biased. This is kind of my division. I've been a Lions fan my whole life and know all of these teams very well. So I will kind of take charge on most of this. But obviously, we will start with the Lions. And as we just mentioned, the offensive coordinator, the Lions fired John Morton and they brought in Drew Petzing as the new offensive coordinator. He was the former offensive coordinator from the Arizona Cardinals. And a lot of people kind of gave it some criticism when he got hired, and rightfully so. The Arizona Cardinals didn't have a hugely successful season this last year, but they've had a really good run game. Obviously, all three of their starting running backs went down, and they were basically playing running backs off practice squads. Their offensive line wasn't very good, and Kyler Murray was down for half the season. So you can't really just look at his numbers from this last season and judge him based off of that, but I'm very excited to see what he can do as an offensive coordinator. And as you kind of mentioned with Brian Fleury, Drew Petzing was very heavy on the run game and focusing on that, which is what the Lions need. Also, it came out today that Taylor Decker is not going to be retiring, and he's going to be returning to the Lions for one more season on the offensive line. So that's very good news. That helps out there. And that's also giving me hope that Frank Ragnow will unretire again and come back and play for the Lions for one more season, since he's technically still under contract for one more season. And let's get the gang back together and run it back one more time. But yeah, speaking on the run game as well, the Lions are also planning on making Jahmyr Gibbs the highest paid running back in the NFL. Rightfully so. He's been probably the most electric, one of the best running backs in the NFL over the last 2 seasons, and that is also due to the offensive line play. I mean, even this year when we didn't have the best offensive line play, he still put up some amazing numbers. So I think, like I said, he's going to be getting a huge contract. Right now, a lot of the rumors are 4 years at $80 million. And I feel like he's probably going to be wanting more. It's probably going to be closer to like Saquon money. Yeah, I guess, Chris, what are your thoughts on the Lions' new offensive coordinator and Jahmyr Gibbs possibly being the highest paid running back in the NFL?
I don't know a ton about Drew Petzing. So outside of, him running for Arizona there for a minute, they were at the bottom of the NFC West, which is my division. And so I can't really, like you said, judge him based on his efforts from last season because of all the unfortunate injury related stuff that was going on with the Cardinals at the time. And so yeah, it's a lot more murky there for me, but it makes me nervous just because of the Cardinals in general. Like, outside of the 1 year where they went to the Super Bowl, they've had some good seasons, some really positive seasons, but as of the last I would say 3 or 4 years, I think they've kind of always been the number 4 team in the NFC West.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure. That is like a questionable call. I'm sure there's other possible offensive coordinators that you were probably a little more interested in than Drew Petzing, but I guess it remains to be seen what he's going to do in Detroit. Jahmyr Gibbs is a lot easier because he is, like you said, one of the coolest and most electric not QBs running backs in the league right now. So it totally makes sense to me that he would be the highest paid.
But the Lions also have a lot of free agents this coming season. A lot of not huge names, but Alex Anzalone is going to be a free agent, and more than likely he's probably going to be walking. Probably going to be on a different team. A lot of rumors are that he's going to be playing for the Jets under his former defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. Some other notable free agents for the Lions, we have wide receiver Khalif Raymond, who I believe is probably going to be brought back just due to his special teams play and just kind of core team morale. Also, cornerbacks Amik Robertson and Rock Yasin, who both played a lot this season because due to injuries on the cornerbacks and just kind of in the secondary in general. So I think both of them are going to be brought back on probably cheaper deals, but again, just as depth options. And then also linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez, who made his popularity through the Hard Knock series a couple of years ago when the Lions were on there during his rookie season. He made a pretty big splash, and it was doing pretty good for his first few seasons until he tore his ACL and did not have as big of an impact last year. So a lot of people are saying he's probably gone. I would love to see him return and give him another chance, and like I said, let him play again. And then we also have the defensive end, Al-Quadin Muhammad. I'm probably pronounced that wrong, but he played opposite of Aiden Hutchinson most of the season, and he had, I think, 11 sacks total and played pretty well. And like I said, he was kind of a surprise pickup through the season. So we will, like I said, I would really love to see the Lions bring him back. I'm sure he's probably going to be demanding a lot of money based off his stats that he put up, but we will see. Chris, like I said, I know you don't have a lot of thoughts or input, but what do you have any thoughts about any of the Lions free agents? Anyone stick out, or anyone else you think that they should bring back?
Nothing that really stands out to me. I do remember, I remember we were watching a Lions game together, and you were telling me about Muhammad, or he had just joined or something like that. You were excited about it. So for Muhammad, though, I am interested in seeing what's going to happen with him in his second season with the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, no, like I said, hopefully we can bring him back. But yeah, there's been a lot of off-season buzz around the Lions. Like I said, the offensive coordinator was the biggest thing, and then Taylor Decker coming back today was pretty big. And like I said, we'll see once free agency starts in March who we actually bring back and who we don't. I'll be curious about that.
I do have a hot take about the Lions. Or I don't know if it's a hot take necessarily, but just like a point I'm willing to discuss about the Lions since we're here in our NFC North division recap.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I think about the Lions is, right, you have a team that is one of the most, or was one of the most injured teams in the NFL during the 2025 season, right? And I think that at a certain point, you have to wonder if there could be an issue with how they're training or practicing and stuff like that. And so I would hope that during the off season that Dan Campbell and company, and hopefully with Drew Pezzig there too, they can kind of look at specifically what they can do to protect their guys on the field as much as possible going into the 2026 season. How will that affect play calls? How is that going to change how they play the game in general? I hope they're thinking about all of that while everyone's getting healthy and ready for the next season. So that's my little soapbox thing about the Lions, but I think that should be a big focus for them is coaching and training and how they're, telling them to use their bodies, basically.
No, so. I completely agree with you. And the Lions have always been known as like a hard knock team, no pun intended. But they've been known for grit, and that's what they've kind of been known for, is training really hard, and we're going to be tougher than you. That's their whole thing. So I completely agree, and I remember, I think it was his second year, Dan Campbell's second year as head coach, and I went down and was watching the I try to make it down every year. The Lions have an open to the public training facility during training camp and everything like that. And I try to make it down every year. And I remember, I think, like I said, his second year as head coach, just watching some of the drills he was doing with the players. And I'm like, that it's pretty rough and can cause injury. And but I'm like, I don't know. He's the head coach. He knows best. And obviously, like I said, over the last 2 years, 2024 and 2025, the Lions have been one of the most injured teams. So I think, and we can't blame it on a power facility near the training camp like we can with the
true.
49ers. So I think, yeah, like you
Well, I
said.
still think Kyle Shanahan should be doing the exact same thing, for the record. Everything I said about Dan Campbell just now, Kyle Shanahan needs to be doing it too.
No, I agree. Yeah, like I said, I
So,
think it comes down to
yeah.
coaching and training in the off season, and I think we need to ease up a little bit and, like you said, plan for the future because we want to be playing in February, not in August. So, moving on, we've got the next team in the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers. They have a new defensive coordinator because their defensive coordinator left to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, which, as we mentioned in our last episode, was kind of an interesting hire because I still think it's weird that the Miami Dolphins hired a defensive coordinator for their head coach. But regardless, that's a topic for a different day. The Green Bay Packers, they hired Jonathan Gannon as their new defensive coordinator, the Arizona Cardinals former head coach that we were just talking about that got fired. He is now the defensive coordinator for the Packers. The biggest question mark for the Packers is going to be Micah Parsons' injury. He tore his ACL. When is he going to come back, and how effective is he going to be? The Packers obviously made a huge trade right before the season started to get him from Dallas. And I still remember the moment that they traded for him. I was at a bar and I was hanging with some friends, and there was a TV. Like, I was in the middle of telling a story, and there was a TV screen like behind them, and I was like telling a story, and I looked up, and I like stopped, and my jaw literally just dropped. I was like, "Oh, the Packers traded for Micah Parsons." I will never forget that. Um, it was a very
That's great.
it was yeah, that was a rough moment.
And then what week did he get injured?
It was late in the season, so that's why, like I said, it's really questionable
Oh, okay.
on
So
when.
they had him for most of the season then.
Yeah, I feel like it was like 3 to 4 weeks before the playoffs started. He went down, and then the Packers didn't win another game after he went down. So, yeah, Micah Parsons, like I said, he's a game changer, and it's going to be a question on when he can come back. Like I said, he's definitely not going to be back till at least close to midseason. So that's a big question mark. And then looking at some of the free agents that they have, again, on defense, they have a lot of big question marks leaving. Trayvon Diggs, which they signed halfway through the season. At cornerback, again, from Dallas. He didn't really play too much, but he, again, when is healthy, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Has led the league in interceptions before. They had Quay Walker at linebacker, who plays more of like a defensive end, because I think he plays more outside linebacker. He's only 25, 26 years old when the season starts, and again, he's going to be a free agent. They're probably going to re-sign him. Other than that, yeah, like I said, they've got a lot of question marks on the defensive end, so we will see what they do. Like I said, if they bring some of those guys back, if they sign some other defensive ends to kind of take Micah Parsons' place to start the season. But yeah, it seems like they have a lot of question marks on the defensive end. On offense, obviously, they still have Jordan Love, who, like I said, kind of down the stretch of the season didn't really look too good. I don't know, like I said, as a Lions fan, I don't really hope they get any better. Sorry to say it, but I kind of hope they just keep going down. But either way, no, I'm kidding. The Packers have a really good young team, and honestly, they kind of scare me. The wide receiver core is really young. The quarterback's kind of young. Jordan Love's been in the league for a while, surprisingly, even though he's only been starting for a few years. Either way, like I said, they have a good team. Josh Jacobs at running back, Romeo Doubs, Romeo Doubs is a free agent too this offseason, so he might be gone, but they still have Christian Watson, Matthew Golden. Like they've still got some weapons on offense, so we'll see. Again, I guess, what are your thoughts on the Packers? Like I said, do you think they're going to improve or, I guess, decline this coming season?
I don't know. I think a lot of it does hinge on Parsons. It'll be curious to see at what point he'll be healthy enough to return, and yeah, like how much is he going to bounce back from an ACL injury like that. I think it is cool that we have a new defensive coordinator in the Packers now. Sometimes when we're at this point in the year, we're kind of looking and making predictions on how these teams are going to play out, and it's like we might not see the full picture of what's going on inside, their locker room or out on the field when they're at practice and stuff like that. So it all remains to be seen. I feel like, it'll be cool to see what they're doing in week 1, and how that compares to the last few weeks of the 2025 season, because it wasn't good for them.
No, that's the joy of the offseason, brother. It's all speculation. And as I just said before, Micah Parsons' trade was, I think, like 2 to 3 weeks before the season started. So, like I said, all this talk on how the Packers were going to do, it didn't matter after they traded for Micah Parsons. Like I said, everyone jumped the Packers up to Super Bowl champions as soon as they traded for him. So it's like we can, like you said, we can sit and talk all we want, but we don't know what's going to happen until week one, what the lineup's going to look like. So, but that's the fun of the NFL offseason, baby. It's all speculation.
Absolutely. It's I was just gonna say it's a tough road to walk at this point.
Exactly. Moving on, we have the Chicago Bears, who were a huge surprise this season. Again, Ben Johnson, the former Lions offensive coordinator, who was the hottest hire. Everyone was very surprised when he went to the Chicago Bears, a division rival. I'm still pretty upset at him. I don't think he should have went to Chicago. And either way, that's a whole nother John Con. Ben Johnson, first year, and as I've said many times, and we've said it on this show, I feel like every episode, head coaching matters, and Ben Johnson is another perfect example of that. He came in to basically, he did bring in a lot of offensive linemen. He did do that. I think he brought in 3 offensive linemen and paid them some of the highest money in the league for offensive linemen. But you need, as we said before at the beginning of the show with the Lions, you need an offensive line to be able to run a good offense, and that's what Ben Johnson kind of exclusively relies on, the run game. And especially with Caleb Williams being such a scrambler and being able to extend the plays, you need to be able to have a good offensive line that can protect him and take care of him. Which, like I said, kind of talking about that, yeah, they made the playoffs this year. They won a game, and Caleb Williams, he looked much more improved than he did his rookie season, which, I mean, most quarterbacks do. They take a leap in their second season. But Caleb Williams, he was the number 1 overall pick, and he was getting called a bust after his first season, and Ben Johnson kind of proved that he was not a bust, that he does have a lot of potential in the league. As you and me were also kind of talking before we got on, the Bears were very inconsistent. They had some plays where they looked like the best team in the league, but then the very next play, they looked like a team where they didn't know what they were doing. They are good, and Ben Johnson does have, I think Ben Johnson is calling most of the plays, but I think, like I said, they just need to be more consistent on offense in general. The Packers playoff game, I don't know if you were watching it, but that was that was an intense game.
Crazy.
The Packers were winning the entire game, and then I remember I was watching it at like a bar, and then like the Packers were winning and I didn't care, and then I came home and put it on just to like see how it ended, and the Bears were winning, and I was like, oh, and I saw the fucking crazy ending. The Bears come back and win, and it was just insane. So but yes, either way, like I said, the Bears can play up to high standards when they need to.
I think that Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, I think they're only going to improve, especially, seeing what they could accomplish in this past season. I feel like there's a few teams where it's like the ones who I feel like there's strong arguments that they could have gotten to the Super Bowl, like eventually, like the Bears, the Rams, like where it's like these teams aren't going to be changing a whole lot because they did so well last season, and so you're kind of hoping that they're just going to keep the team together as much as possible and refine, like really be watching their film from this past season. How can they make improvements and tighten things up going into 2026? That's really what I think is going to be happening with the Bears. And I think that, I think Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, they have nowhere to go but up from here. So
yeah. They did hire a new offensive coordinator as well, Press Taylor. So the Bears actually promoted their passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator, Press Taylor. He was formerly the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator from 2022 to 2024. But as I just mentioned before, I think Ben Johnson's doing a lot of the play calling on offense, so I don't really think the offensive coordinator, I think he's just kind of like a placeholder at this point. But looking at some of the Bears free agents, again, they have a lot of defensive free agents. They have Kevin Byard, their star safety, Joe Tyron, their edge rusher, Andrew Billings, another defensive lineman, Chris Williams, another defensive lineman. Again, a lot of defensive free agents. This is still early, so they could bring a lot of these guys back. But as you mentioned, I think the offense is still, for the most part, kind of intact. They still have a lot of those guys on the roster. So again, it's just kind of refining and building on the momentum from last season. But defensively, I think they're going to have to rebuild. And like I said, they're going to have a lot of holes on defense unless they bring some of these guys back or, like I said, bring in some other free agents. So we'll see. And I guess that's for both the Packers and the Bears, as we just mentioned. I think it's the defense is the biggest question mark on who they bring back and who they sign or draft, I guess, is going to be the question. So, but
Yep.
that's it for the Bears. Moving on to the last team in the NFC North, we have the Minnesota Vikings. And the biggest topic surrounding the Vikings is them letting Sam Darnold go and choosing J.J. McCarthy over Sam Darnold, which I understand. They drafted J.J. McCarthy very high. They took a risk on him. Sam Darnold, they just signed as kind of like an offseason. They signed him, and the Minnesota Vikings had Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold on the roster and let both of them go and kept J.J. McCarthy. And Daniel Jones, went on to do some great things in Indianapolis. And Sam Darnold went on to win the Super Bowl in Seattle. So when he led the Vikings to one of the best records they've had in a very long time, should they have let Sam Darnold go? No, but obviously hindsight's always 20/20. And I get, again, if I'm in that position, if I'm a GM and you draft a guy very high and you think very highly of him, you're going to take him, because because you need that money. Like, you're going to pay Sam Darnold a shit ton of money. You need that money to go to other assets on the roster to help J.J. McCarthy while he's on a rookie contract. So from a GM standpoint, I understand it. You took a risk on this guy. You want to surround him with talent. But again, like, hindsight's 20/20 when he just, like I said, took the Seahawks to one of the best seasons they've had in a very long time. So, I don't know. Clearly, looking back, they should not have let him go, but at the time I understand why they did, and I'm sure you're very happy that they did and you were able to get Sam Darnold, Chris.
Yes, I am. Yes.
But yeah, I guess that's, like I said, the biggest question mark. We'll talk about the free agents in a second, but I guess, what are your thoughts on the Vikings going into this offseason? I'm pretty sure they're keeping the same coaching staff going into the next season.
Okay. And J.J. McCarthy got injured too on top of all of this, right?
He was injured like 3 different times. Like, I feel like he got injured and came back. And then hurt something else and came back, and then hurt something else and was out for the season.
Yeah. And that's when that kind of stuff happens. It's like, okay, is that the team's fault or is that the player's fault? I don't really know. But I want to give J.J. McCarthy a chance. I want this young quarterback to come into his own and bring great things to Minnesota. That'd be very cool and be a good story for football. And I'm always about that. Mm-hmm. However, I don't know. There's a really strong possibility where this just doesn't go well, and they might bench him halfway through the season if he doesn't show up. I guess I don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen, but like, there is like a nightmare scenario that is not like, it's a non-zero probability that could happen. So I don't know, but I want them to do well. I don't know. I think it's something that they're really gonna have to focus up on in the off season, and really putting the time into J.J. McCarthy and making sure that he's ready to take on the starting QB position. I want, I don't know. The Vikings obviously want to get what they paid for, right, out of this too, because it was a big deal for them. But at the end of the day, I'm not really sure. Now that I know it's his third season too, it's like, well, I don't know. We might be. I don't know. What do you see that as, like, what do you think is the likelihood that they bring someone else in for the QB position?
I think they're going to bring in a veteran quarterback, but not someone who's going to threaten J.J. McCarthy. Like, they're going to bring in someone who's like, oh, if he gets hurt, which he probably will, he can play a couple games. But, and again, like I said, a veteran who's probably been in the league for a few years and can help him out and teach him a little bit. So
I have a great idea.
What?
The Minnesota Vikings should bring on Aaron Rodgers.
There was talks that supposedly he was going to go to Minnesota for a year, but same thing, they just didn't. I think that was the thing, they didn't want to like threaten J.J. McCarthy with like Aaron Rodgers. So, but
I don't think J.J. McCarthy or really any QB should be threatened by Aaron Rodgers.
At this point, no. But that would complete
that
would complete the Brett Favre cycle, because that's what Brett Favre did. He played for the Packers for a very long time, then he went to the Jets, and then he finished at the Vikings. So he would complete the
That'd
Brett
be
Favre.
cool.
Yeah, complete the Brett Favre cycle if he did end up at the Vikings. I think that's gonna do it. We're gonna finish this off with giving our predictions for the division, and we're not gonna give record. We're not gonna give like actual records, but I think the division is going to finish. And obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I think the Lions are gonna take it back. They won 2 years in a row and lost this last year, so I think Lions are gonna be up number one. Then I think the Bears. Then I think the Vikings. And I think the Packers are going to have an off year. And I think the Packers are going to drop down to number 4. I think that's going to be the NFC North this coming season. What are your thoughts? How do you think the NFC North is going to break out this coming?
This is tough, man. The Lions and the Bears are almost a toss-up for me. That's the thing. They've both got some weapons on both teams where it's like I could see it going either way. I feel like I have to give a slight edge to the Bears, and I don't want to break your heart with that, but I think I see a reality where the Bears end up number one in the division again. I think the Lions will be right behind them. It could be like a Seattle LA situation where they're neck and neck, literally trading the number one seed. I could totally see that happening. Whoever ends up with the number one seed, though, that's really tough to say. But I think I have to give the slight edge to the Bears because I feel like at this point they have less problems to fix. I think Detroit has more things that they have to work on in the offseason, personally. Again, like the injury stuff that I was talking about, I think those things are bigger hurdles for them, and we'll see from there. Also, I mean, there's been talks about Jared Goff too, so I don't know. But I think that what the Bears have right now, you know, if the season started today, I think the Bears would have it. But after that, I would probably agree with you though, Vikings and then Packers.
Yeah, I obviously am a little bit biased. I do think the Lions have a better roster overall than Chicago. Like you said, I think injuries played a huge thing, and I think play calling played a huge reason on why the Lions weren't as good as they should have been this last season. But I do think overall, I think the Lions have a better roster than the Bears. And also, as we just mentioned, they're going to have a lot of holes on defense, where I think the Lions, we have a couple holes on defense, but like I said, I feel like overall with Aiden Hutchinson and like I said, if our secondary comes back healthy, I think we have the better overall roster. And again, I think, like you said, that's what the NFL comes down to is health. So honestly, if we can stay healthy, I think we're going to be better than the Bears. But I do, like I said, the Bears finished number one in the division. They won this year for a reason, and they are a dangerous team. And I do see a world where, like I said, they win the division again. If the season started today and everyone is 100% healthy, I think the Lions would win. But again, I'm very, very biased on that. So.
Oh yeah, just for the record, I want the Lions to have the number one seed. Sorry, despite thinking that I think the Bears might have the edge, I think I do want the Lions to take it all. I could see a situation though where it's literally maybe they have the same win-loss record at the end of the season, like they're both 12-4 or 12-5 or 13-4 or something like that. So I don't know. That's not a prediction or anything, but just I could see that happening.
But like we just said, it literally comes down to health, because say Caleb Williams or Jared Goff goes down for either team, like the whole season's screwed and both teams are out. So
absolutely.
Like
we saw a lot of QBs go down this past season. Mm-hmm. Like a lot.
Yeah, no, in the NFL,
I don't know. It felt like a lot to me anyway.
It was, and the NFL does not want that, because the NFL doesn't want their primetime games being Kyle Allen versus Teddy Bridgewater or whoever. I don't even know what backup quarterbacks were starting this year, but the NFL doesn't want that on their primetime games. Like the NFL wants these star quarterbacks to stay healthy. That's why they have all these rules to protect the quarterbacks. And I totally understand, because when you see a Sunday night game and like I just said, it's fucking Gardner Minshew versus, it's just not
Russell
exciting.
Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. Like Gardner Minshew versus Russell Wilson. You're like, I don't give a shit. Like, so. Yeah, say fucking like Sunday Night Football, Gardner Minshew versus Tommy DeVito. Like again, nobody gives a shit about that. So.
Oh man.
But all right, I think that's gonna do it for us today. That is our NFC North breakdown predictions. Could we have broke it down more? probably. But those are our thoughts, not yours.
Deal with it.
So that's gonna do it for us this week. We took a week off last week, unfortunately. We might do that in the future, who knows? But like I said, we'll try to keep it weekly, but the off season it's a little sporadic, so we'll see what we can do. But either way, thank you for tuning in, especially if you made it this far. We appreciate you, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.